All right, it's 2022 and it's Maker Monday, and we are back. I am Patrick Awesome with Mojo at Marketing Media here for your broadcast here this Monday. And of course, James is in the building. What's up, James?
I'm just excited to be here. It's Monday and it's 2022. We made it all the way to 22.
We made it.
And we got an awesome guest tonight. I am personally a guy that plays D&D. This guy runs a D&D game on Twitch. And I'll let him tell you all about it. So without further ado, Dustin, tell us what you do and about yourself.
Well, hi, everyone. My name is Dustin Ritchea. Thank you so much for having me be a part of Maker Monday. So I am the Dungeon Master for Roll Seekers, ROLL, Roll Seekers. We play a homebrew style game of Dungeons and Dragons, and our big catchphrase is, we're normal gamers just like you playing Dungeons and Dragons for your enjoyment.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is definitely for everybody's enjoyment. I love watching those kind of shows. So what Dustin, what got you into it? What made you decide like, hey, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it for a whole bunch of other people? I know everybody likes to play D&D, but what made you do it for like an audience?
Well, so the truth is the journey started when I was back in college, and I actually was dating somebody who said, hey, I want to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, no way, that's not happening. I'm not going to do that. And so she ended up inviting all my friends over and said, you sure? I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a shot. Why not? And by the next day I had all of the books. And so, cause I loved it so much. And fast forward about, oh my gosh, maybe 6 years. I was sitting around with my friends and we were actually out on my patio, and we'd watched like Dimension 20 and Critical Role and a lot of some other live streamers. And I just sat there and said, like, why not? Like, why can't we do this? I have a background in production and theater. And I was with some friends who have backgrounds in theaters, and I've always wanted to tell stories. I've been writing stories since I was in about 5th grade, and I had a hard time writing them. But whenever I played D&D, they just like came out like the muses were with me. And so I said, why don't I try telling the stories this way? And it's been that way ever since. We just did 25 games. We've been doing it for about a year, and now we're Role Seekers.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that I love the fact that they kind of had an intervention for you. They're like, hey, listen, say you don't want to play D&D, but we're your true friends. Let's go. Right? That's how it works. That's how it has to go. A lot of people, if you're listening and you haven't played Dungeons and Dragons or any other like tabletop RPG role playing game, try it. I would say that like I know tons of people both here at Matchbox in town in Lafayette and all over that have started to play or haven't played, tried it, and have loved it. It's not for everybody, but don't knock it till you try it, right? That's kind of what I'm saying here. So, Dustin, this is as you know, this is Maker Monday. So, what I really want to do is focus on kind of the making of the production that you do. Obviously, we can go all over the place, but the big thing that I really want to make sure to focus on tonight is like how how many people were on your team, and kind of tell us about like how you actually broadcast it out.
Perfect. So our team right now is we have about 6 full-time members is what I would say. And that fluctuates from time to time. So we usually will have 3 people on each side of the table, including myself. So I guess that makes 7. The people that are currently starring in it are Kevin Wesley, Jake Thornton, my wife, Allison Mitchell, my brother-in-law, Trevor Spiegel, my sister, Jamie Spiegel. And then we have one of my 2 cousins will usually be there, Eli or Calvin Carden. And so we started off with a couple other people. We had Zachary Gibson was one of our members. Zachary actually had bigger work commitments than he realized, and Calvin ended up going off to school. So you can't blame him for that. But we were all friends. We'd been playing for about 4 years together when we finally jumped in, and we like having it be about 5 core members, 6 if you include me, and then kind of a rotating seat where we get to invite other people in the community to come play. We've had people who've only played a couple times. We've had seasoned veterans come. In fact, my friend who lives in Minnesota has come down a few times for it. We had the media guy who helped us, Garrett Portinga, who helped us with Green Hat Media make our intro video. He ended up guest starring in one of the episodes. And so that's the core team. Is we call them the role seekers, and then anybody else who jumps in as like a guest star would be a fellow seeker, is what we've been calling them. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention our audio technician, Daryl Ritchea. It's actually my father, and he ended up he got involved. We used to play at his house, and he liked watching us play. And I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing," and he's like, "I want to be involved in some way." And he ended up being involved in a ton of ways. He's painted miniatures for us. He bought a 3D printer. He's made 3D miniatures for us. He helped build a custom game table, helped us with our audio. He's helped me. We're finishing the basement, turning it into a dungeon. He's helping me with that. He's got contractor experience. And he helped us with the audio as well. So in a lot of ways, he's a primary maker for role seekers. But the biggest journey of this has been the technical side, which I'm sure you can appreciate doing live streaming. Is I have a background in production. I have a background in theater, English, and I have a background in media design. So I know all the pre-production elements, but I had never live streamed. And so that was basically 0 to 100 in about 3 months. We decided that we weren't going to go live for 3 months, 3 to 6 months. We practiced in there. We were practicing. We got our stories developed, and I was learning how to do it because I did not want to, not that there's anything wrong with it, but I didn't want to just play like a lot of people do on Roll20. And for those who are not familiar, that's where you get on live cameras like webcams, and you stream with people across the internet, and you kind of play on your computer. And one of the things I really liked is I love the visceralness of being in the room with everybody. You can feel the energy, you can feel the excitement, you can change on a dime based on what you're feeling in the room. And it's communal storytelling like around a campfire. And I didn't want to not have that. So I looked at Critical Role, and I saw that they were having 3 to 4 to 5 cameras streaming at once. And I was like, how do you do that? I mean, there's software exists for webcams, but to get them all live, it was a challenge. And I will tell you, I bought a lot of equipment that I ended up having to return because I wasn't getting it right. And so the two biggest challenges that we had, getting everyone on camera at the same time, which is called super source for anybody who wants to know what that is. It's called super sourcing.
Thank you for explaining that to people. Appreciate that.
It is called super sourcing, and it is very difficult to do, but the A10 Mini Extreme will do it now. So that's what we ended up upgrading to. That was the first challenge. The second challenge, and this one I brought to my father because he's our audio guy. I said, look, I want music in the background. I said, and he's like, yeah, we could do that. I said, no, you don't understand. I want the players to be able to hear the music, and I want people at home to be able to hear the music. And he's like, that is a much taller order.
Yeah. I mean, I have issues just recording 2 people in the same room, which is part of why we do it this way, right? And you're recording all those people plus the music going. And I love that, though, that the music, as the music turns for the players, everybody watching can hear it too. So it is important.
Yeah, and so we ended up, we got a Behringer XR. I don't remember the number after it, but that's what we ended up getting. And it ended up allowing us to sample out the music sources or keep the audio feeds down low enough to where it would catch the music that we're playing. And so we've got 7 mics down there. And with 7 mics, you have to add compression into them. You have to add limiters into it because people will start screaming. Nat 20 gets rolled. People are screaming. And you got to make sure that that's not peaking. And so that was a tall order. And my father would come in and be like, hey, I got it. And I'd listen to it. And I'm like, we can do better. And you can see it. You could sit here. And he's just sitting there going, you don't even understand what you're asking. I said, I know. And we can do better. And he's like, no, this is good enough. This is good enough. And if you look back on episode 1, to where we are right now, we did a heck of a lot better. And so like I say this as humbly as I can, but I'm really proud of it. We basically are doing this in our basement. We're doing it in our basement. We basically have 2 tech guys, myself and my father. I was actually running the switchboard for about 6 months before my father took it over. And I will say that if you look at our production quality now, not when we started, but now, I think that we're putting on a show that has the same, at least production value, as some of the bigger players, some of the really heavy hitters. And like I said, I'm the producer. I'm literally, that's it. It's me. We don't have any sponsors, nothing like that yet. So I'm just really excited of the work that this team has been able to do.
And to be really clear, you're in northern Indiana.
Yes.
Right? So you're in Hollywood, you're not somewhere else crazy out there. You're close to us, yeah, right? You're real close to us.
We're in the Chicagoland area, streaming live from my basement.
Are you a region rat, as they would say?
I am a region rat. Yes,
that's how it goes. Everybody, if you go anywhere near or anywhere away from here, you just tell people you're from Chicago. You're fine, right?
It's the only way people know where I'm at.
Yeah.
You say northern Indiana, and they're like, "Is that a suburb of Chicago?" No, it's not.
Yeah, that's what they ask anyway. Yeah, true.
Yeah, so that is one. That is definitely something to be proud of, for sure. I've watched a couple of your episodes. You guys look like you have a ton of fun, but you're right in the fact that even though we're used to seeing all that production, right? We're used to seeing people just basically acting normal and having fun playing the game. So much goes into that. But what's awesome is when I was watching it, I couldn't really tell that I wasn't like, oh, well, these guys are like new, right? Or they're like, I'm going to give them some benefit. It looked good. It looked great. It like I was into the game. I wasn't sitting there being like, oh man, well, I couldn't hear that guy quite as well on the mic or something like that, which is how it is for a lot of people who are trying to stream. There's nothing wrong with that. Like you said, when you started, that's also how it goes, right? But it is something that specifically, if people are on here and they're watching, go give it a watch on Twitch. Are you on YouTube as well? Or tell us where else we can find you.
Yeah, so I always tell people to head over to rollseekers.com, and it's ROLL, seekers.com, because you can find everything there. But we are on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. We are you could watch all of our episodes on YouTube as of right now. We're also re-uploading them to Twitch, but we're not 100% yet. We've got 25 episodes total, and we've only got about the first 12 on Twitch, but all of them are on YouTube. And then you can also listen to us anywhere you want to listen to podcasts. So we stream through Anchor, and I highly recommend Anchor. Anchor is amazing because it pushes it everywhere. So if you want to listen to us on Apple Music, you can. You want to listen to us on Spotify, Google, all of it. And like we consider ourselves a niche of a niche of a niche, and so like we joked one day because we had some people asking us like, how big you expect to get? And I was like, man, if we got 10% of like Critical Role's audience, we'd be superstars. Like we'd be the biggest thing. No. We'd be the biggest thing in the whole universe. I'm like, but if you think about that, that's only like that's not actually that many people. Like, unfortunately, like it's in the grand scheme of like, are you going to get millions of people watching? Never. Like, even if we were the number one.
Entertainment is what you're saying, right? Like entertainers. Yes. You're not going to be, Pitbull and doing that kind of thing.
I'm not the next Beyonce,
Yeah, now you take that back, sir. You could be the next Beyonce of D&D.
But I'll tell you, I think. But that was it. And honestly, you bring up a really great point, James. We actually set up a mission statement for ourselves when we started. We said we will have succeeded if one person we don't know recognizes us. And it was a little bit of a fluke, but we went into our local game store, and my mother was home for Christmas, and she just walked in with us, and she went up and like, you got to watch these guys. You got to check it out. And I'm like, oh gosh, pulling the mom card. But the next time we walked into our local game store, the guy at the counter literally started clapping and said, I watched you thinking it was going to be nothing, and I loved it. And so I took that back to the group, and it's like, we did it. Like, that was it. Like, we we did what we set out to do. And like, what more can you ask for than that?
Yeah. I mean, advertising it is your next big thing, right? Like, you play well together, you have your storylines, you have your audio set up and your whole setup that I guess you're still working on a little bit, like you said, but you have all of that down. Now it's about just having fun and getting people to watch it and advertise it, which things like, talking to random people in other cities like you're doing right now and lots of other stuff, right? Like I'm sure that if this is anything else, if this is anything like other podcasts, which I imagine it is, I mean, you're on all the same podcast stuff, you're just going to get picked up by people who are like, hey, I want another type of D&D adventure, that sort of thing. The problem that I'm seeing with it right now is that there are a ton of people that are trying to do this and that want to do this. So it's differentiating yourself from those people. And I think one, like just from what I've seen, you are at least like what I've said, like you were just talking about, what you were just saying, as far as you've tried really hard on getting all your audio good. It looks like you're having fun. You're having a blast. I think that you have everything, going your way toward that. And that's a big reason when I saw that you were doing this, I'm like, okay, I got to have him on the show, right? This seems awesome. It's in Indiana. Like, come on. Like, I like D&D. Let's go. Right. So let's, if you can, anybody out there like watching this, for sure, check them out, but then tell people about them. And it's just like for anything else, word of mouth is going to go a long way. But
also for anybody that is watching, if you have any questions, feel free to put those, type those in your comment section. It'll come up and we will ask Dustin those questions. So
please
feel free to get involved.
Speaking of questions, we have a ton of questions that I want to ask. Some that we ask everybody, but some that, very specific to this. I could sit here and talk D&D forever, and I'm probably not
can literally talk D&D forever too. Yeah. There's two things James can talk about: D&D and zip ties. So,
zip ties are good too. But
yeah. So go ahead, James. The first question.
You're an audio technician, kind of. The zip ties are the most important thing.
Very important.
Yeah, totally most important. But let's skip the D&D talk for a second. As far as actually making the studio and making the podcast, what would you say like your favorite tool? That's one of our big questions on here is like, what's your favorite tool? Hopefully something that you use a lot that we wouldn't have like maybe thought of, right? But what's the thing you're not going to leave home without when you're trying to do your podcast?
Gaff tape. I'm just joking. It's not.
It's
a good one though.
That's a very good one.
No, that's a really good. I'm sorry, I'm bringing it back to D&D. Like the number one tool that we use is D&Ders and in our game, and I'm not leaving home anywhere I go. It's dice. That's my answer.
Yeah.
It's dice.
You got to have dice. I've tried to play D&D without dice, and then you're on your phone and making it roll, and it's just not the same.
And I think up there for me, and I know it's not necessarily the making with hands, but it's a pencil. It's really a pencil because the making that we're doing is also telling a story. And so writing down notes and having, I draw maps out of the worlds and I go back to it. So I hope it's not a cop-out answer, but honestly, it would be, I think it's a pencil.
I mean, there's no such thing as a cop-out answer.
Okay, good. That's my answer.
Gaff tape, pencil, any of those things work. So, but what you're talking about there, though, when you say pencil, is you're talking about making of the world, which is the other making that I wanted to get into as well, making of the D&D like adventure, if you will. So can you kind of walk us through, without giving any spoilers, hopefully, sort of how you've made the world or worlds that you run?
Yeah, no, I love it. So the background here is that I was fortunate enough in college that I actually got to spend a summer researching Lord of the Rings. So I spent the whole summer researching J.R.R. Tolkien and how he created story worlds using what's called narrative dynamics. So that was probably the coolest thing I've ever researched. And I got to do it for 400 hours over one summer. And from that, what I learned was the two biggest things were consistency, and then a map, really like create the map of your world. And before that, the whole world of Nabell, because our full name is actually Role Seekers and the Legend of Nabell. Nabell started when I was in 5th grade, and it started actually in the shower, and I was humming a tune, and the tune never ever left my head, and it ended up becoming the focal point of everything. And in fact, you can hear that song before every game. We play it before every game. It plays, but we haven't talked about it a lot in the game, which is kind of fun for me. But what happened is as years went on, I just kept coming up with little stories, and I played D&D campaigns, and they'd be totally disparate, totally different stories. And yet in my heart, I was always like, but they're all part of the same world. And so I'll give just a very basic rundown of this world, is that Nabell is a world that was created by gods. The gods are gone, and the world's not finished. So what they were making didn't get finished. And so all across the world, there's all these disparate tales going on, but there's one through line. And it started with a poem, because that's how Tolkien started his, and it's, "In the darkness lies the light of the gods, whose death is marked by a towered tomb, for which they built in sacrifice to save our world from doom. A nameless god on an empty throne now peers through shadowed glass, his will to see all things unmade, for darkness rule at last." And so the idea is that there's one through line, is that the original gods that made the world burned themselves out of existence to stop one god from unmaking all of their creation. And this god still exists. And so the idea behind everything is that it is the green eyes in the darkness. And it's a constant theme throughout all of our stories. You could even start seeing it start showing up in our current game, is that there's just something there. And so the way that I like to describe it to people is that the gods are dead. They have been for a long time. And yet sometimes prayers are still answered. And that's kind of the mythos of the whole world. And so I've got some philosophy background and some theology background. And the whole concept of this story is that belief is stronger than reality. And that's the theme. Belief is stronger than reality. And I gotta say, it's the most perfect theme for anyone who's ever played Dungeons and Dragons, because I'll tell you, the more you believe, or the more you play your character, the better your rolls are. And it's almost like magic, but I've seen it too many times to be like, it's not serendipity.
Right. So what you're saying is both in game and out of game, right? You're seeing it happen, which is very, very cool. I gotta ask, you mentioned that when you first started, you were in college, but it sounds like you'd been thinking of this throughout. So the stories that you've been thinking throughout your life, were they just like stories you'd written down and you hadn't put into D&D form, or how's that work?
Yeah. So I wrote a couple stories starting all the way back into like high school. I wrote a story called The Dark Scepter, and it was about a character named Markion, and he was traveling through the sand deserts and stuff. And what's amazing is that story, just in our 25th episode, they formed what they've known as the Staff of Astarius, and it's the Dark Scepter. And they found that out. So like, I'm actually bringing characters that I wrote going on like almost 20 years ago into this. And what's wild was like, I used to write all the time. I actually have an English degree, so I was writing constantly, but I was a purple prose writer. So I loved words. I just wanted it to like, I was writing like I imagined an actor would speak. And unfortunately, that's not how people read. So every professor I ever had was like, dude, this is just so drab. And I'm like, no, this is my heart. This is my heart. So, and like from the writing perspective, I used to write things and like I'd spend hours writing it. And my professors are like, this is sentimental it's trite. They're like, it's garbage. I'm like, well, that hurts. And then they'd be like, well, do this exercise. And I said, okay. And I'd write it. And I'm like, I don't care about this. And I'd write it in like 20 minutes. And I'm like, there, it's done. And they're like, oh, this is great. This is how you should be writing. And I'm just like, so what happened is I finally realized like it wasn't coming. When I write it, I have to force it out. It's not a process I necessarily that I like sticks to me. I have to force it. But when I'm playing D&D and I'm improvising and I'm just having fun, it comes out. And I've had like, I know it's family friends, but I've had them be like, people have come back and be like, I've never played a game like this, or this is wild. Like how is it all connecting? And at a certain point, not to sound like superstitious or anything, but I kind of tell them, I said, it's kind of like I've got to give it up to the muses. Like sometimes characters will say things or plot devices will happen and I'll laugh. And it's not like I'm laughing at my own jokes. It's like, I didn't know that character was going to say that until they did. And unless you're playing D&D or you are a writer or an actor, a lot of people look at me like, you sound off. And I'm like, no, it's wild. The world becomes so real that it lives on its own without you.
Yeah, it's one of those cool things when like the character comes alive on its own and it's just natural. It's natural. Like I'm from a music background where people start playing and I used to rhyme and just stuff just naturally happens and people that are artistic actually don't get that.
They don't.
Yeah, I mean, and the cool thing for people who don't know is if you're DMing like Dustin does, he's a really good example here that you're constantly quote unquote like playing D&D, right? You're constantly throughout your entire life, every time, like you said, in the shower, he came up with the tune throughout all of it. You're constantly being like, all right, cool. My characters could do this, or I could do this. This could be a plot point. This could be a cool character. This could be a good voice for like the goblin that I'm going to introduce them to, or something else like that. Like, so if you are, that's part of the reason why when I play D&D, which I don't have time to much, I do prefer to be a DM. And I imagine, Dustin, you'd be in the same way, just because you constantly are playing in your mind. So it's also great to be a player, to be able to hang out and think through what you want to do, but it's a lot less work. It's a lot less involved especially when you're making an entire story like Dustin, you have in this whole, you said it was homebrew, right? So the entire world, for people who don't know as well, you can buy full modules or books or random things that have been made by tons of other people, large companies, small companies everywhere, that basically you can read through and it'll tell you, okay, well, this is this character, this is what his voice does, and everything else. But typically, most people, I think, put their own flair on it. Now, what Dustin's doing is he's started his own complete world, right? Which is the beauty of that is that as we were watching him on stream and his players on stream, we don't get to say, okay, well, I know what this character is that's coming up. Oh, he just dropped Strahd's name. Okay, he just dropped random names of monsters and things throughout the world that we know. We have no idea, right? So everybody's discovering the world and making the world together. And honestly, what you're saying as far as like things just coming out and you laughing and you didn't know that specifically happens in my experience with worlds like that you've created completely, rather than ones that you've just read off. Now, don't get me wrong, there's no right or wrong way to play D&D, but I would just to point out to the audience, like, if you go watch the show, you're seeing a completely brand new thing coming out of Dustin's head. And I wanted to ask you a question about that too, Dustin. When you are, I guess, thinking through your game, do you have, I know some people have like, not players, but they have like muses, or maybe not muses, but they have like a writer's friend group too, right? Or so, I don't know how else you'd say it, but do you have people that don't play your game, but are your like confidants, or you're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this and this, and help you brainstorm, or is it just all you?
So my father and my mother didn't play a lot, and I have a very close family. So every once in a while I would have talked to them, but I know what you're talking about, like the Inklings and stuff like that. Like Tolkien had the Inklings, he would get together. And I wish I could say yes, but most of my closest friends that I would talk about that, they play. So for example, like one campaign I ran in college was with all my college friends, and I would come home and I'd talk to friends about what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. But like I had to hold a secret in for almost 2 years. Like I knew the game was going to end where it began, and I couldn't tell anybody for 2 years. And when it happened, the group would just they all just threw their pencils down. They're like, no, there's no way you could have predicted that. I'm like, yes. And I had to keep a secret from every single person I knew for 2 years.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's really hard.
I was about to say that can be really like kind of lonely in general, but also like we were saying before, or I was saying before, you're constantly playing, you're constantly making the story happen. So that's kind of the trade-off there. What advice would you give to somebody just starting out being a DM? Well, since we're in the middle of talking about D&D and DMing and specifically, like somebody's never done it before, what's a couple of tips you'd give them?
So I've played with a lot of different styles of players, and I try to take everything that I learned to heart. Like I try to learn as much as I can about all these players, and I've listened to like Matt Mercer talk about what it is to be a DM, and I've talked to different groups, and I know that like anymore, a lot of people on like YouTube and stuff, they're very much about like communicate and make sure everybody's having fun. And I've actually had some falling outs with people. I've had some growth experiences with people. And if I could give one piece of advice, it is that when you sit down to play, like just talk to your group, talk to them and tell them, like, I've had some people say like, it's all about the players that come to your game. And maybe it's controversial, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I believe it's about the whole group. I believe the DMs have fun too. And so there's two pieces of advice I would give. The first piece of advice I would give is implement the DM feat. Tell your players right away, and I always do this. I said, I have what's called the DM feat. The DM feat allows me to break any rule in the game as long as it affects story and doesn't directly target a player. Like that's it. Like I'm not going to kill a player outright unless I talk to him. And I've broken that rule and I've paid the price. So like always follow the DM feat. And I think the second one is ask everybody kind of their play style, right? And let them know what your play style is. So for instance, I have friends that all they want to do is fight. They want a module. They want to play. They want to go in. They want to kill everything. And they want it to be all about mechanics. And they want to be superheroes. That's it. That's what they want to do. And I basically tell them, I'm like, then I am not the DM for you. Like either find a DM who just wants to run dungeon crawls or play a video game. That's kind of where I'm like, that's where I'm at because and that's okay. Like, and if there are groups that's what they want to do. And that's the beautiful thing about D&D. But mine is more about, hey, please trust me as a DM that I'm going to try to tell a story that brings you along for something climactic. And there might be a session that really upsets you. Like you rolled for something, you rolled high and you should get it. And I say, you don't get it. And like, you'll be like, oh, I feel like the DM's targeting me. And it's like, please trust me that it might be one session from now. It might be 10, but eventually you're going to understand why your character didn't get that. And I hope it has a better reward. And like, that's kind of that's like my whole philosophy of D&D. And if I had to give any advice to a fledgling dungeon master, it would be prepare for your beginning, prepare for your ending, maybe have a midpoint, maybe, and then just let it happen. Just let it happen. Because I know DMs who will sit down and they will spend hours and hours and hours preparing. And it does one of two things. Either one, the players don't do anything you planned and you just get mad as heck. Or two, you force your players to do everything you planned and they get mad as heck. So like, it's better to have, in my opinion, a beginning, an end point, and then just practice improv, because the golden rule of Dungeons and Dragons is players screw everything up.
It sounds like you just gave us all a speech on how to deal with middle management. It's like literally, like,
I mean, it's the same thing,
it's the same thing,
So yeah, you start your year out, and you're like, okay, this is where we're at. All right, company needs to get here at the end. We're just going to improv it the rest of the way. No, that's not true. You need a plan, but still, but actually, a lot of it is that, right? Like, so you plan scenarios. A lot of times, you're not really like with DMing. You need to know, the stats of the things that you might have that you're throwing out. So you're planning these scenarios. You understand what's going on with it, but you don't I mean, and it's everybody DMs differently, right? So I'm sure I've played with lots of different people. I know you have too. But what's cool is it sounds like you're very much about the storytelling part of it, aspect of it. And for people who don't know, it really is that for most people, I would say in some respect, right? A lot of times the DM will come in, they'll dictate a story, it's happening, but then the players all have to make decisions, and it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book, I guess, for people who don't know. The players were all saying, well, I'd like to go through door number 1 or door number 2, or I'd like to just do whatever I want to do, right? They'll make decisions, and then the DM has to take those decisions and can cut it back to the story, or or write a story around it. So the really fun part about what Dustin's saying is that he's figured out a way to kind of sit down and say, hey guys, you got to trust me when we're telling this story. And like you're going to work with them when your players are all going to do random things, and he's going to tie that all back. And the fact that you were able to, Dustin, to bring that back like you wanted to, that's a giant success as a DM. One, to have players care and want to play that long so you can actually bring it back. And then 2, to have it actually work that way. Another just question about making in general. I guess this kind of goes for everything, but what exactly is your, I guess, motivation / passion for doing this? A lot of people out there might be watching, they may be like, why does he just care about the story that he's doing? Like what's in it for you, I guess, or why do you do it?
It's my creative outlet as the best. Mm-hmm. So I used to do theater for a very long time. In fact, I wanted to be a theater professor, and life just kind of, it just didn't work that way. Like I decided I didn't actually want that. Like, so I used to do a lot of theater. And one of the things that I ended up realizing, and actually I made a video about this on YouTube called what is Dungeons and Dragons. And I talked about the fact that like Dungeons and Dragons actually kind of like saved me. I was heading down a dark path, and I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it ended up making me be able to hang out with my friends again. It let me be creative in a way that wasn't theater, and it kind of let me figure out who I was as a person, where in theater I felt like I was just putting on a lot of different acting masks. And so the one thing in my whole life that has been important to me is Nabell. It's kind of been a through line, and it's been a story I've always wanted to tell. I've always wanted to finish it, and I just never write. I never write it. And so if I had to say I have one motivation, it is to tell stories to hopefully entertain people. And when I say that, I mean stories that have what's Tolkien called eucatastrophe, or good triumphing over great enormous evil, like Frodo destroying the Ring of Power to destroy Sauron in Lord of the Rings. And that's the type of story I want to tell. And every time I tell a story in Dungeons and Dragons, the area that I think that sometimes I'm the weakest is sometimes with character motivations. And any good writer will tell you character motivations make the best stories. And so it's something that I'm constantly trying to do. A lot of my NPCs end up being really wacky and zany. Like they're just like, people are like, there's no way this person could exist. And so I just like to have fun with it, but almost every single time a player will like try to question me on it, like, why are you this way? I love it, because then I try to come up with why they're that way. And some of the most beloved NPCs have actually been, I brought him based off of this crazy guy. His name's Kevin, and people, he always plays basically the same character, and he cheats. So we joked with that. And, but the thing is they start to learn about this character, and they'll have these tragic backstories. And just last game, the group went to defeat one of the big BBEGs, big bad evil guys, mm-hmm. the big bosses. And as they did, their 8 favorite NPC or non-playable characters, their 8 favorite non-playable characters said, "You go take down the big bad, and we'll go fight the other big bad for you." And so the group fought the big bad, and they ended up winning pretty quickly. They rolled some of the best rolling I've ever seen in my life. And the video shows it. We're all screaming. But the most stressful part of the night was the 8 NPCs fighting against a character that could kill them all. And so you just saw all the players just biting their nails like, no, these characters have to survive. They have to win because they loved the characters so much. And at the end of the night, even I was sweating, and I was the one that made this terrible situation happen. Even I'm like, come on, you can do it. And it was all based on roles. It was all based on, can these guys do it? And I don't know. That's motivation. You know, that's
for sure.
Being able to bring these characters to life and make people feel these like, the best thing as a dungeon master I've ever achieved is to have a player roll a die, roll a 20, and literally stand up, kicking their chair over, screaming because they succeeded. And from my experience, that doesn't happen when you play as just the superhero, the unstoppable hero who's going to win no matter what. I've seen games shift, and the players will be like, okay, I rolled a 20. I killed that thing. And that's a totally different play style than this is everything. This is everyone's gonna pass away in this moment, and somebody rolls it, and just the whole table just erupts in screaming. I can't, as an artist, I can't ask for anything better than to give somebody that much joy in one moment.
Yeah. I mean, you make it matter, right? Which is a big part of it. That sounds fantastic. And it comes through when you're watching it too. Like even the bit that I watched, you got everybody was into it, right? All your players were into it. Which let's talk about your players for a second. So like any DM is, you know, as good, I guess, as their players. I guess that's one of the things you could say. What are some of the, I guess, favorite things that you have about your players? Let's talk about good stuff.
First off, I'm blessed to have the players that I have. I'm absolutely blessed. I think the show is blessed. I'm blessed that there's this amount of trust in our group that everyone is. It's taken us years to get to, where people want each other to succeed rather than just themselves. And for a group dynamic, that is so exciting to see. I'm just going to go through the players because I think all of them deserve something good. So I'll start with my brother-in-law, Trevor. The best thing about Trevor is that he's grown so much as a player. So Trevor started off playing, and he basically played himself. In every single role, he was Trevor, and he was the paladin, and he was the hero. And he came to Role Seekers as this almost chaotic evil halfling bard who was like just totally ridiculous, talked like, "Hi, it's me, I'm Elric." And he was like, "Oh, Dustin, I can't do this if we go live. I'll look silly." I said, you got to do it. And he did it. And it is a beloved character. And so to see him go from playing himself to playing one of the wackiest characters, that's a huge, that is amazing. Jamie, my sister, Jamie plays characters who are rather similar because she is such an animal lover and a bleeding heart. But the thing about Jamie that was really exciting was that she's in that moment for the story, right? Like she is listening at all times, and her character is going to do what is best for the story at all times. And so last game, there was a mirror, and the mirrors have always been bad. And she didn't even have, she literally flew over a bad guy and destroyed the mirror. She's like, I'm destroying it. And for her, it's all about stories, not mechanics. And she went to mechanics first. I'm ending this threat right now. I don't care what happens. That's pretty awesome. My wife, Allie, my wife is probably one of the biggest introverts I've ever met. And she even jokes, she said, had you told me before I met you that I'd be playing a live stream Dungeons & Dragons game where people could see me be a nerd, she's like, I would have laughed at you in the face. And now she is on she's never missed a game. So, I mean, if that's not growth, I don't know what that's amazing. My buddy Kevin is a paramedic, and he comes and he plays anytime he can. And to see him like it's so cool to see him in our first games. He was a guest star, and now he's a full member, like 100% full member. His character started off real quiet, and now he's probably the most boisterous character in the group. So that's super exciting. My cousin Eli is, he's going to be so mad if I get this wrong. I believe he's only 14. He's 14 or 15. So pardon me. He's right there. He is the youngest role seeker. He's also, to my knowledge, probably the youngest live streamer playing Dungeons and Dragons that I like in terms of like a professional production. And he is a human encyclopedia. And so the whole group jokes that when Eli is off, it's going to be a rough game. But when he is on, he is one of the best players anyone's ever played with. So like, you got to give it, when he's off, it's because he's 14. When he's on, he plays like a 60-year-old encyclopedia with this, like, he has some of the most powerful moments in our game. Calvin came out of his shell when he started playing. He was an introvert. He's still an introvert, but he like just you see a 180. Like he became it like brought him totally different person. Jake Thornton is actually the coolest thing about Jake Thornton, who just started, is that I didn't know him. I didn't know him 6 months ago, and now we're best friends. You know, like Dungeons and Dragons did that for us. And then the last one I want to at least give a shout out is Zachary Gibson. Zachary Gibson was one of our original players. He has since left Role Seekers, but he helped me grow as a dungeon master. He helped me see things in a lot of different ways. And I joked with him that I've never talked more Dungeons and Dragons theory in my entire life than with him. And the coolest thing was I was actually the person that introduced him to Dungeons and Dragons. So it went from, here's an introduction to him basically becoming a scholar of Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm almost speechless. Like I'm everything without my players, and I'm going through my head making sure I didn't forget anyone. But like it has been really, 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 really wonderful.
Yeah, that you can tell. We can all sit here and see your face light up when you're talking about your players, right? You can tell that you're having a lot of fun doing this. So before, when I was asking, hey, what's your motivation? Like that right there, exactly what, come on guys. Like he's having fun. You can tell he's enjoying what he's doing. Oh man. Okay. So that one sounds like a fantastic group. It's awesome that you've met, people through this. And that was actually going to kind of be one of my other questions. A lot of people, so I do a lot of cosplay stuff, but also a lot of D&D things. And one of those things that you've mentioned was that, like, it's kind of helps people get out of their shell. Tell people do like the 180. You were saying your wife was an introvert, but now she's, on live stream. What other stuff in general do you think like D&D like does for just people in general? It doesn't have to be you. It doesn't have to be like your players. But what are some of the, I guess, the benefits? Because I know a lot of people, don't know a lot about D&D. Some people do. It's getting insanely more popular than it is. But what are some of the other benefits of playing, in your opinion?
Well, I know some people have actually been using Dungeons and Dragons to help people that have I don't know how to say it. It's like social anxiety. Mm-hmm. People with social anxiety. It's also been used to help people with certain disabilities. They use Dungeons and Dragons. For me, in my side work, I actually work as a therapeutic dramatist. I teach at the Parkdale Recovery Center for people who are recovering from substance abuse. And one of the biggest things that I've seen is the power of storytelling, whether it's fantasy or anything. There's actually a recovery thing called psychodrama, where people will actually relive past traumatic events, whether it's PTSD or abuse or anything like that. They'll relive it through improvisation, and it actually helps certain people overcome that trauma through the scene of this with story. And I don't want to go so far, like, a lot of Dungeons and Dragons is, wizards fighting dragons and stuff, but when you get down to and you start telling real stories, like not that there's not a real story, but I mean like when I say real story, I mean something that affects the human condition, something that like people are you see yourselves in the characters. That's really what I'm trying to say. You see yourself in the characters. When you start seeing stories like that, you start learning not only about yourself, but you start learning about other people. One of the things that I've tried to instill in my players, and it's taken years, is I've had a lot of people will come to our games with a certain idea of what victory is. And victory to them is destroying the villain. That's it. Like, kill the villain, you know? And through our stories, it's been like my biggest show. And I've said this at so many players, is I offer them tremendous power and I reward them for turning it down. And so, like, the idea of this kind of selflessness, right? Giving rid of selfishness is rewarded. I've seen players, maybe it's just because they know me, but I've seen players do it where they'll be like, you know what? No, I don't need that. I don't need that Vorpal blade. My friend needs a healing potion. And like, there's a psychological thing happening, right? Like, they're getting rid of something that would help them be awesome in the game. And now they're helping another player. And if you look at it from the game, it's like, oh, cool, they helped another player. But if you look at the subconscious, now it's like, hey, I'm actually helping another human. And there's, I think I might be looking too much into it, but I think there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up a good point in the fact that it can be helpful in real life. And then the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is we are role playing. When people are playing, doing this, they are role playing. So if you go on there and you watch Dustin or one of his players do some terrible thing for whatever reason, that doesn't mean that Dustin is a bad person. Okay, and it doesn't mean he would.
Thank you for the disclaimer. It's important.
That
There's
is
some weird
actually
stuff.
something else. Especially live, right? And let's talk about live for a second. I mean, if you go and you do something on camera that I guess you don't approve of, you're live, so you have to play it off, or you have to make that happen. So you obviously trust each other. But what are some of the I guess new question, sorry, but what are the advantages and disadvantages, I guess, of going live? Because there's a lot of people out there that pre-record, as you were talking about before, and you have a lot of stuff pre-recorded on YouTube already, but you guys go live when you play.
Yeah. So one of the things that we had to do is we are an explicit show. And we did that because we wanted to make sure that, if little kids are watching us, like they need to know that we cuss, we swear, and we deal with some difficult topics. Like, there's some difficult stuff that's brought up. And I think one of the biggest tenets of our group is that we want inclusion, right? Like, we want our show to make sure that it's welcoming to everybody and that anybody can enjoy it. And so that's really important. And that's really kind of the only red flag. We've had maybe a couple of times somebody has said something kind of as a joke that might be said behind like closed doors, and they've said it live, and it's like, hey, we talk about it afterwards. Like, hey guys, you can't say that live. Like you could drop an F-bomb, but you can't say something that makes a group of people feel bad about themselves. And that's kind of been our barometer. That's it. Like, that's what we talk about, is like, don't do that. There's also a couple of little things, like, we know we're live. We also know that we're technically, I mean, we're a commercial venture, but we're not really. But like, we know that there's copyright infringement issues and stuff. So we try not to go too far down a certain road. And that the biggest thing that my players have said that they don't like about going live is the music. We had to get licensed music. So we actually had to buy licensed music through Soundstripe. And I think Soundstripe's amazing. Like, I love it. But to not be able to play like Imagine Dragons or like, something really epic at the like Through the Fire and Flames by Dragon Force or something like this moment, my little cousin was like, dude, I miss the music. So like, it's taking me more time to find music on Soundstripe that's licensed appropriately. But what the cool thing about that is, so you're kind of your duality. My father is a musician, and he's actually started writing some songs for our game. So that's pretty cool. I wrote the intro song, and I helped write the theme song, the da 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 da. And so like, I've written 2, my dad's written 5. We actually are starting to play them in our show. So that's pretty cool. And then if I would be lying if I didn't say that the worst part about going live is the stress. So because I'm a tech guy, there have been times I've had to apologize to my group after a game because I'm like, I'm sorry, I was way too stressed out before we went on. Like, I didn't communicate appropriately, or I said something I regret. And I'm like, we've had to set up like basically limits, like, hey guys, 5 minutes before the show, you've got to be in your chair, And so that one constraint can be a little draconian. But what we've tried to do, and this has been a lot of personal growth on my own part, at least I hope, is I've tried to get it to where we plug something in and we go live. So that way for the whole group, it just feels like we're playing the game. And that brings me to probably the best thing about deciding to go live. And that is, there's always a schedule and your players always show up on time. The win.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, that is literal key to D&D. And also let me point out the same thing. If you say you want to play D&D, that's cool, go play D&D. But when you say you're going to do it, it's a commitment. It's a real life team commitment. And Dustin, actually, I think that's a great point you just made, that the game's going to go on, right? And that's actually what helped us. Kofi and I, dude, we on Monday nights, we're like, hey, it's happening. Hell or high water most of the time, right? We've had to cancel some. But I hadn't thought about that as far as a live game. And it's also got to be, I mean, I'm just speculating here, but it's got to be kind of exhilarating to not really know what's going to happen, right? And it's live, and it's like not dangerous, but unpredictable, right? It's even more unpredictable than the other way. And you guys are all actors, right? And in the end, you are doing a bit of acting, right? You're playing your characters, of course, which is acting, but then of course you're live too, so it's still a show. Everybody realizes it's a show. You said you practiced for 3 months beforehand. Did you practice like you were live, like you were playing, like you had to like lean in and talk to the mic and make sure that it sounded good, things like that? Or how did you practice for going live? I'm just curious.
I actually have our first ever live game like recorded in the archives, like that, just for me. And we started with Roll20. That was our first one. We see if we could do it, So when I say practice, the biggest thing that we were trying to do was, I was trying to get all the cameras working, and I was trying to get the audio working. But what we were really doing was we started the campaign we're currently playing. We took a page out of what Critical Role did. They started their first season was midway through a campaign, and we did the same thing. And a lot of players kind of questioned me on it. They're like, "Hey, I don't know about that." I said, "No, it's gonna. I want to finish the story, and two, like, I think it's going to be better for all these players who have never gone live to have all this background material that they could go with." So we started that campaign as a joke. The literal campaign started with all the characters were running a bakery, and every D&D game was just a quest to go find a recipe out of a phylacterian cookbook. It had the soul of a wizard in it, and it would give them a recipe for a piece of food and a spell. And so every game, people would come with food that was last week's recipe. So we were eating breads and cheeses and meats, and like it was just fun. We were just having. We had just done a 2-year series campaign. I'm like, I can't DM that way anymore. Let's play for fun. And we did it for about 6 months, and then the group slowly were like, we want some story, like more story. And I'll tell you, as a writer, how do you turn? You have a magical bakery into some type of epic like story. And so like, that's what we did. And so when we decided that we were coming back and we're like, we're going to live stream this, we actually had to go back and figure out who our characters were, because basically they were no one who ran a bakery, and we had to come back with all this like lore and backstory. So that was really it. It was 6 months of figuring out the technical aspects and also being like, okay, let's actually have real characters rather than I am Chef Boyardee,
Are you telling me that Chef Boyardee is a licensed character? You can't go live with it? So I don't want to stop your story, but there's a ton more I want to ask you. We're right at like 8:00, which we have a little bit more time. One of the things I got to ask though, do you have any house rules specifically to D&D that you like? You're like, hey, I love this rule. It's a special rule that we do. I don't know, like combo attacks or random other stuff. Tell us about some of the stuff there. I know that gets really nerdy, but we've been talking very high level and trying to explain D&D. So now we got to get into like, hey, what are some of your house rules?
Yeah. So this, great question. Some of our house rules, and some people have gotten some pushback on this, but our biggest house rule that we have is that a nat 1 always fails and a nat 20 always succeeds. If you get into the rules, it's really like only ability checks that it's only like attack rolls and stuff that get the nat 20, nat 1. We do it for everything. So a nat 1 always fails, a nat 20 always succeeds. And that's that rule. We don't do any like the big variants where like massive damage, death and stuff. We've tried it all. It doesn't work. Like we're not doing that anymore. So massive damage doesn't kill you. We don't do flanking, anything like that. And then some of the big house rules that we've implemented, the DM feat, the epic feat. This is a homebrew rule, but we've adopted it. Like we love it. So the epic feat is once every level, your character gets an epic feat. And the epic feat is you could say, I use my epic feat and automatically succeed on anything you're trying to do, except for when it comes to combat and saving throws, like death saving throws. So like you can't use it in combat for like, oh, I want to hit him, I use my epic feat. Can't do that. But if you're like, I just gave a speech to the king and I need this to happen, you could use your epic feat to succeed. Which gives you a moment to be truly epic. And almost always they're used at these most beautiful times. So that's one. The next one that we use is the plot point. The plot point is you get 1 every 4 levels. And the plot point allows you to change the dynamic of a story in one way by just claiming plot point. So what this is like there's a cauldron. Like you walk in and you see a bubbling cauldron and somebody goes, plot point, it's full of something else. Or plot point, it actually belongs to this character. And so the plot point rule is you can't use it to empower yourself, but you can use it to change the course of the story. And we've had some unbelievable ones used, like just some really like, oh, you know what? I think that character plot point needs to be a sister of this character. And you're just like mind explosion. Like, yes, it's awesome. And it gives the players that like this is what's happening now. This is the story.
And that's a great rule because it helps do the collaborative storytelling that you were talking about earlier. And it keeps you on your toes and it keeps you having fun because now all of a sudden you have to write that in and you weren't planning on it, but it's still cool. And you trust your players. Right?
Yeah.
That's something you have to be able to trust your players on. You mentioned every level. Sorry. And I do want to hear.
No. Keep going.
But in every level, you get to do this and every 4 levels. How do you do leveling as well? Like go on with your other ones, but I guess what level do you tend to have your characters be? Is 4 levels like crazy high for you guys, or
so we do milestone. Mm-hmm. So
okay, milestone.
whatever you achieve is how you do it. We tried doing experience and it got so complicated. So I actually had a spreadsheet. And I'm like, okay, no, we're not doing this anymore. So we do milestone. Usually when it's a brand new campaign, like 100%, like we're coming in, it's level 1. We start at level 1 and we go. We actually, this campaign, when it started, we started at level 0. And that was a homebrew mess. I won't even go into it. It didn't work. But like we usually start at level 1. And so I would say that we try to get to level 20. Like we do try. Our last campaign got there. But I would say like super high level is like 16. And I think that's for most players. Once you hit 16, your characters could do like break the rules of physics stuff. And then you mentioned some more homebrew rules. We implemented this one this season. And it is this campaign. It's called the Fated Strike. And this one's a big one. This one is you only get it once every 10 levels. So in an entire campaign, you could only get it twice. And what it is if you roll a natural 20, has to be a natural 20. So it won't work for like fireball and stuff like that. But if you hit somebody with a nat 20, you could say Fated Strike. and do 1.5 times your maximum damage to the character. And so that is used. They've used it like twice ever in the whole game, but it's used to like you're fighting the biggest boss in the game, or the whole party's about to go down and that nat 20 just got rolled. Now you're going to take that guy down. And so, like I said, I've only seen it used twice ever, but it's been the 2 times it was used. It was pretty epic.
Yeah, I mean, really, that makes it more exciting, right? So a lot of games, a lot of homebrew game rules do that, just that, right? They make it more exciting, which is part of why I want to hear about it. How do you, I could talk about this. There's a lot of questions. I'm like, man, I could go into all the little things. I'm not going to. Again, I think Seth was on there commenting too. I play D&D with him, and I know he runs some games, and I'm sure I'll be sharing this out to other people as well. But you've been talking a lot of DM stuff. If you had to pick to be a player character, you got to pick a class, you got to pick a race. I know you've probably done it before, but you got to pick one to be for the rest of every time you play. You have to be that. What's it going to be?
Okay. The answer is always charisma based, and I have an even split right now between. This is what I've played the most. I have an even split between a sorcerer. And I have an even split between a paladin. But to answer your question, because you asked me to choose one, I would choose a human paladin. That's actually what I'm playing right now in the Curse of Strahd. My wife is DMing that just for fun, which is super excited. I get to play. But I think that the paladin, and I like human. I know I'm boring. I'm vanilla. I love playing human characters. A human paladin. I think that class most represents who I want to be. So if I had to choose, that would be it. Because to me, they're like the definition of a hero. And you can kind of play them cocky if you want, which is also fun. Yeah. But they're basically always like, I'm going to help someone. And I don't know, something about that's really fun. I've played evil sorcerers, and that can be super fun. But like a lawful good human paladin, it's fun because the whole group will roll their eyes like, oh God, here comes the paladin. And you're like, you can't steal from that person. And it's just, I don't know, it's just a blast.
No, it's always a fun thing to ask anybody who plays D&D, what's your character of choice if you had to pick one. So that's good. It's not telling completely, but it's fun to hear the aspect of it. And I agree with you as well, as far as like charisma based characters. I'm a bard through and through, even though I can't sing or do anything like that. I just love bards in general. Kofi, you haven't said much. I know we're getting real on time. What's going to be? I mean, I know you were a rapper or are a rapper. Would you just be a bard? What would be your class?
I'd probably be the evil wizard.
The evil wizard. There it goes. That's
that's Destro coming in. Yeah. I'll tell you what, Dustin, I do have a question for you though, because I'm really interested because just from what little bit I've got to look at this and watch this and see this, and I've seen the tabletop, and I've seen the awesome miniatures that you guys have made and playing with. Could you tell me, like, are a lot of those your original designs? Did your father make those? Did you 3D print them? Like, how are those created? And what process did you guys use to make those?
Yeah, so we reached out to all of the companies. Like, we actually reached out to all of them and said, hey, we're doing this live stream. Can we use your stuff? And we actually got written permission from all the companies of the stuff that we use. So we use Paizo minis, we use Reaper minis, we use Bones, Dark Sword. We use Dwarven Forge. That's the set terrain that we use. So Dwarven Forge, which is like, check them out. They're unbelievable. But we use Dwarven Forge. We have a subscription to Loot Studio. That's what my dad's been 3D printing. And we also got permission from them. We actually have a sponsor with a guy who's starting his own 3D company. It's called The Grinning God. And so he ended up sponsoring our game. We got a year subscription from him for him sponsoring our game. So we used some of his stuff for his monsters. We got another sponsorship with Gaming Honors, and they just started their own live stream called Honor Among Thieves for Hero Pins. This is it's an actual, like, tells you where you're at, like, so you don't have to metagame. Like you could be like, oh, I'm yellow for my hit points. So we use them. And unfortunately, we don't do any of our own designs. We don't do any of our own like miniature designs because none of us have the 3D modeling skill set. But I do want to give a massive shout out to he changes his Instagram tag a lot, but right now it's Massive Mola, massive _ Mola. His name is Frank Feiging Liu, I believe that is how it's pronounced. He is our artist. So he is a sophomore in college who has done all of the artwork that you'll see. And we're going to be getting all of that up in the next 3 months because we're on a 3-month break right now from Role Seekers. We ended our first season, so we're taking a break. But during that time, I'm going to make sure it gets all on the website and things. But he is unbelievable, and he has made, I think, upwards of like 10 or 12 different art characters for us. And so like I just can't say enough good things about him. And so that has been a collaborative process of me sending him concept art and going back and forth and be like, no, this guy has a sword, or this guy needs a crow flying above him. And sometimes he's like, Dustin, we need to be done with this character. But the work he has created is just par none.
So is he the one that drew the kind of the characters behind the players in your overhead thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and for people who haven't gone and checked it out, like you're on the internet, you're watching this, go right after this, go over to the ruleseekers.com. There's really, really awesome stuff they're doing there. You mentioned your minis and your Dwarven Forge. Honestly, that's just fantastic to play with. Is it something that you thought you were going to play with, or is it something like, are we always like, hey, that stuff's, I mean, for the way I am right now, I'm like, man, I do minis, but as far as all the Dwarven Forge stuff and everything like that, that's more than I ever see myself playing, but maybe it was a goal for you.
I bought Dwarven Forge. There's actually like a meme about this. It's like, hey, you started off and you realize Dungeons and Dragons is just theater of the mind, and then you buy dice, and then you buy miniatures, and then you buy mats, and then you buy a table, and then you start snorting Dwarven Forge off of the coffee table. Like, what happened was I bought Dwarven Forge the first time for our season finale, campaign finale, and I wanted it to be a big deal, and I bought like one set, and it came in. And as somebody who likes Legos, I should have never bought Dwarven Forge because it's the coolest stuff that I own. I'm a big fan of Theater of the Mind. My father and actually a couple of former players, they wanted to do a lot more digital. They wanted us to like project maps and stuff on the table. They wanted to have like green screens behind us and flames. And like, I know it's copying Critical Role a little bit, but I'm like, I like Shakespeare. I'm like, Theater of the Mind. I just want to do it. So I didn't think I was going to own that stuff, but Dwarven Forge, I bring out for almost all of our big boss fights. Like I can't not. And, and the detriment to this is that my wife is a fan of it. So between the two of us, there's no reasoning. Like, we're just like, oh, we shouldn't buy that, but we're going to, so let's buy it.
Yeah.
So monetarily, no, I wish I had never bought it. But
actually, that's
my
awesome.
soul is very happy.
That is awesome. I was about to say everybody knows what to get you for Christmas, right? The entire household, just Dwarven Forge.
Dwarven Forge or Legos.
There you go. Legos. Yeah, no, that's a lot. It's expensive, but it's a lot of fun. And,
it's masterfully made.
Yeah. No, I mean, nobody's doubting the quality of really any of those things that you said. I also very much like the fact that you've, got written permission from everybody too. I know that's important for what you're doing, but it's also just great to be able to give that shout out and put it on your website and say, like, these are the things that we're using. That's fantastic. And, it helps a whole lot when you're doing things like that.
Yeah. I mean, that we wanted to help the gaming community. So like when I say groups have sponsored, like this is kind of our thing. Like they just sent us pins. Like that was the sponsorship. Like we wanted to help promote this company. I mean, and I'm still promoting it, like I want them to succeed and they want us to succeed. And that's kind of what I found from all of the creatives that I've talked to in this industry is they're like, oh, cool, you're doing that. Like, yeah, use our stuff. Just give us a shout out and vice versa. And it's awesome.
Yeah, one thing that's a universal. We say it every episode: community, community, community.
Yep. I mean, it goes for makers, it goes for D&D, it goes for all of those for sure. And what's, I guess, super fun to me right now, and I was going to ask you lots of other questions, but we're getting low on time. But when you started this, did you think you'd be where you are now, I guess?
So we had no delusions of grandeur.
Okay.
We had hopes of, like, there's always that thing in the back of your head that's like, do what you love and it will, success will follow. And so that there's a part of my soul that's still there. That's like, man, how cool would it be to get a call and be like, hey, we want to feature you or something like that. Like, kind of like with this, like there's always that thing that's like, man, I'd love this to keep growing. But where we're at is we've seen constant growth, which is great. And the big hitter for us was TikTok. I didn't want to do TikTok. I didn't want to be on it. I just didn't. It was like, no, it's kind of gimmicky, but our content lended itself to it. So yep. I made a TikTok video, and I will tell you the biggest success that we received to this day, like I almost cried, was there was a young girl named Trixel the Pixel. They ended up making a. They're actually non-binary. So I want to at least give them that shout out. They're non-binary, so I apologize. But like they ended up illustrating our like 1 minute scene. So there's a TikTok video of us going like, I'm a snail and and it's like talking, and she illustrated it, or they illustrated it, and like. We got the tag, right, that said, hey, yeah, this is from Role Seekers. And I literally about cried. Like, to me, that was the biggest success that I could have possibly dreamed of. And I got to say, one thing that has been just unbelievable, and just like, thank you to anyone who's watching, is we have not received a negative comment yet on our social media. Like, we're not. Yeah,
wait for it.
I know what's coming.
That's when you know you made it, when you get the haters coming out everywhere. Yeah.
But the thing is like, we're not getting thousands of comments, but like, but the fact that every comment we've got is like, whoa, what is this? Or where can I find more? Or we love you guys. Like, that's success. I mean, so no, totally. I didn't think we'd be seeing that type of success, and we have.
That's fantastic. And I'm glad that you realized that is success, right? Because I mean, you're doing it for fun. You'd have just as much fun almost in your basement, hanging out with all your friends the same way a lot of us do with D&D, but you're also being able to take that joy that you're doing in the stories, and you're sharing that with everybody else. So that in itself is fantastic.
It's been really rewarding. And like I said, I think we've all grown over this last year. We've played for a year. There's been ups and downs and tears and laughter, and like, I think our biggest goal now is realizing that no matter what happens, we just want to play. And I have to kind of remind myself of that, because the more I feel like I push, like, oh, we could be something, the more it becomes work, and the love kind of gets sucked out. And the more we keep it like, guys, let's just get together and play, the better our games have been. And the players have said it too. The players have actually said, like, these past few games, they're like, this is some of the most fun I've had playing Dungeons and Dragons. And so, like, that means something is working. Something's happening.
Right. I mean, when your players are telling you they want to play again, they want to do another campaign, they don't want to stop playing. I mean, like you said, when people were cheering at your table, when they hit it, when they rolled 20 or anything else, when it matters, when you're making it matter, that's what it's about for sure. And we all get to watch it now. So everybody just go to rollseekers.com again. And, subscribe to their YouTube. I'm going to do this for you because I'm really bad at promoting myself sometimes. But dude, yeah, like for real, go check them out. And with that, Kofi, do you have any other questions?
I do not.
All right. Well, what I'm going to say is I'm going to let Dustin, you go ahead and let us know where we can find you. Where are you the most active on social media and things like that?
So I would say the best way to find us is via rollseekers.com. As always, go to rollseekers.com. But then after that, we really do try to be active on everything. So like we have a Discord channel. We would love you to stop in there. We've got people monitoring that. So like if you actually have questions, you want to talk to us, Discord is awesome. It starts getting some action. I am always answering. I almost always answer on TikTok, just because like any comment I get, I have made it sure to make it 100%. I reply to like every comment on
good.
TikTok. And then, if you message us, we'll get to you. You can email us at info@rollseekers.com. But we're all over. So rollseekers.com, you can find us on Spotify. You can find us on Google Music. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can watch us live on Twitch this April. You can watch all the episodes and get caught up on YouTube. You can watch it on rollseekers.com. And then we post little shorts and funny little videos on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter.
All right, Kofi, you want to go next?
Sure, I'm going to keep it nice and short and sweet. I'm Patrick Kofi Austin. You can find me on LinkedIn at Patrick Kofi Austin, Mojo at Marketing and Media. And we always are here to help you make everything great.
And yeah, I'm James Wolfgar. I'm downtown Lafayette, Indiana, at the Matchbox Makerspace. And I believe, if you want to come by and see the space, if you want to talk online, email me. It's just james@matchboxstudio.org. We're always looking for people to be on the show. We're always looking for people to come down and see something. I don't want to put her on the spot, but I think she's actually printing out some D&D miniatures right now, currently. And so we're talking about D&D, and that's just how it is. So we have some resin printers, we have some 3D printers, we have some laser cutters, all sorts of different things. We can do sculpting, like 60 different ways of making things, including even like vacuum forming and some other things that would be less common. So if you're into making things, be it hobbyist, or you have an idea that you want to do, or you have an invention you want to try, hit us up, come down. I'm happy to give you a tour. I'm happy to show you the space. And then it's open 24 hours to our members. So with that, I will see you guys, and Kofi, I'll see you again in 2 weeks for the next one of these. Thanks a lot.